Hey everyone, so sorry about that delay. They weren't joking when they said that Salesforce kind of shuts the city down during Dreamforce, and I learned that the hard way. So I apologize in advance. And it is super early, and we did get started a little late. So just as a reminder, we're here for the Lightning Design System session. And so before I start, I have to do my due diligence. This is just a forward-looking statement that basically says that we're not encouraging you to make any decisions with your stock options or encouraging you to buy or sell anything on behalf of these talks. Just kind of general information here. So I'm on the Salesforce user experience team, and my name is Isha Kasliwal. I'm a senior developer, and what I basically do is work on the intersection of design and engineering. And so not only do I work with designers to help make sure that a lot of their designs are abstract enough and they're keeping everything in mind from maintainability and scale, and then also with developers so they can be able to consume the designs in the most effective manner. So I mentioned scale and maintainability. A lot of what the Lightning Design System is made for is scale and maintainability. We make designs and we write code that can be used across several different platforms and by anybody that really consumes it. And we maintain it as well and write it in a way that can be reused over and over without having to revisit the code or the design several times. And we support multiple devices and platforms, so everything ranging from mobile to desktop, and also on Windows and Macs as well. And so how did this really come about? What was our reasoning for making a Lightning Design System? At Salesforce, you can imagine, the platform is absolutely huge. We have thousands upon thousands of pages across different platforms within our company, as well as the companies that we acquire. And so we're working with dozens of Scrum teams and literally hundreds of developers and a lot of different designers at the same time. And so when everyone is designing and developing things on their own, it gets really hard to have everything look the same and work very cohesively. And that was one of the main reasons why we decided to build a design system. A lot of questions that we would often get would be, where can I find the icons, or what color is the button border, or what should the margin be? And those are questions that if you've ever worked on a design team or a development team, you know that you are also answering those questions or asking those questions at the same time. And when you have such a huge organization, you want those answers to be available to everyone all at once. You don't want to keep answering the same questions, and you don't want that to be, or you don't want those questions to be answered differently every time. You want there to be one color for the button border, for example, that's used across the board. So 2 years ago at Dreamforce, we talked to a lot of our partners and customers about the style guide, and that really gave us the impetus for creating this sort of thing, or really it brought about the need for it. So a few years ago, we created Salesforce One, which was an app for mobile, and a lot of the designs that we used were very similar, or a lot of the designs that we used were designs that people liked and they wanted to use them over and over. And so this is something that we provided for them, which was our original style guide, where people could take, they would have guidelines set up. They could take things like colors and typography and apply them to their own specific platforms. But then a lot of our customers and other partners were asking us questions that were how can we make my app look like this? Or how can I use the CSS that you all use on your platform in my app? And so partners wanted their apps to look like Salesforce. They asked for design best practices. What a lot of people ended up doing was reverse engineering our code. So they would, if you're familiar with web development, they would quite literally go to our pages and inspect element and copy the source code. We also created third-party bootstrap Salesforce themes, but those often had to be maintained according to Bootstrap, which was not something that we built in-house, and so we had a lot of cross-maintainability issues there. And then a lot of our partners just wanted to have the Salesforce look. They didn't want to have to, use outside layouts or outside colors or outside frameworks. They wanted to just have something that was built by us and for our customers. And so last year at Dreamforce, we ended up releasing the Lightning Design System, which was our first kind of go at having a living style guide that was beyond just a style guide that plopped, a bunch of just brand guidelines for people. We actually built out a UI library, we built out components, and we built out a lot of maintainable HTML and CSS that people can literally just copy and paste and apply to their website, and it would look exactly like Salesforce. And so a few key points about why the Lightning Design System worked out so well was because we open source SLDS for you. SLDS is the acronym for Salesforce Lightning Design System. So we open source SLDS for you, our customers. Our main, or what we wanted to achieve the most was to be able to make a framework and a platform that all of you could use. And by doing so, not only were we able to help our customers, but we were able to help all of our teams internally as well. So keeping our customers in mind first really helped us within our own teams as well. And so yeah, we powered all internal releases. So every single internal release, you can imagine how huge the Salesforce platform is. It is powered by the Lightning Design System. So you can imagine that as much code as we can keep the same coming from one place as possible, we try to do. And so to go through a little bit of what I'm going to cover during this talk, the Lightning Design System is made up of design guidelines. It's also a CSS framework, and I'll go over a few resources and tutorials that you could check out to learn more about it. And so if you want to, otherwise, you can visit lightningdesignsystem.com or getsLDS.com to learn more about it on your own and to use it, potentially. And this is what the website looks like. If you first go to it and you click on the Getting Started page, there's a side for developers and a side for designers and different resources for both if you want to use it. So going over our design principles, which is the core of what makes the design system. It's what we like to base everything off of with every iteration of the design system. So clarity, which is to eliminate ambiguity, is one of our key design principles. Efficiency, which is to streamline and optimize workflows, is our second key design principle. Consistency, which is creating familiarity and strengthening intuition by applying the same solution to the same problem. And beauty, of course, because we are all designers, demonstrating respect for people's time and attention through thoughtful and elegant craftsmanship. And so how do we keep colors, spacing, sizing, all of these values that are generally variable across different design frameworks consistent? And how do we keep our design system agnostic with one single source of truth? So we developed a system called design tokens, which basically takes a lot of, if you understand how variables work, it takes a lot of values for things and just turns them into variables so that a lot of different teams can consume them over and over. And I'll get a little bit more into it. So the design tokens help us scale our design across web applications, prototypes, and native platforms. You can use these design tokens across every single device that you have. You can put it in one code base and it will just work everywhere. Our assets are stored in a repository and they automatically update in the app and style guide as we update them ourselves. And so if you assume that just a basic color variable, we have like Salesforce blue, we have a hex value or an RGBA value that corresponds to it. If we ever wanted to update Salesforce blue, we would just update that value and that translates across every single instance of that design token. So one of the main reasons why we wanted to use design tokens is because we wanted to eliminate redline specs. So a lot of people in the room, if you're designers or developers, you might have, or most definitely have seen a redline spec before, where every single value is mapped out for you, every single pixel is noted on the screen. But what happens when a designer wants to change, it says 16 pixels right there for a margin. What happens when they want to change that to 18 pixels? When you specify it if in the code, if you write it very specifically, it is a hassle because you're writing it over and over in different instances. Why should you go and update every single instance of that value when you could just do it in one place and hope that it just works out everywhere, which if you use design tokens, it usually does. And so this is just another example of a lot of redline specs that designers would hand off to developers. And with design tokens, we don't have to do this anymore. So if you visit lightningdesignsystem.com, there is a section for tokens. And as you can see on the right side, it covers everything from colors to spacing to media queries. And it's very detailed. You can see that it translates, for example, in colors, it shows you the hex value as well as the RGB value. So it goes through, it's pretty thorough. And we also handle spacing in several different units as well. And so if you want to get a little more into what a token looks like, the required elements of a token could be as little as the name, the value, and a comment for what that token generally deals with. And we have aliases, which can, again, like I said, Salesforce Blue, it's so much easier to remember a name or a nickname for a color versus having to remember the actual hex value that it translates to. So I think we can all assume that slate gray is probably a gray. And then on our design tokens page, you would see the color swatch and everything too. And then tokens can have a lot of additional elements. So you can have deprecated flags, you could have types and categories, and these are just some of the additional elements that we use here at Salesforce, but we could definitely modify it to work for whatever situation. And so I did go through this on the screenshots of the website, but a lot of different types of design tokens can be font families, line heights, colors, shadows, spacing, animation. It handles most CSS, close to almost all CSS, but not all. And our open source design tokens tool is called Theo, made by Salesforce UX to generate design tokens. So you should definitely check that out, again, on lightningdesignsystem.com. It creates a JSON file, which can convert to SAS, LESS, JSON for iOS, XML, also color swatches for designers. So here is an example of a color swatch in Sketch that translates to exact design tokens that we have. And here is a design tokens swatch in Photoshop. And I add this because a lot of times designers see tools like this and they assume that it's only there to benefit developers, but here on the Lightning Design System team, we care about both designers and developers because our team is made up of both. So there are no more hard-coded values, which is the key takeaway from using a tool like this. And designers refer to design tokens in their specifications. So again, like I showed you the red lines before, it takes out the need for having to specify individual pixels everywhere. You just specify values instead. And so this is an example of what a spec would look like with design tokens. So there's no more proliferation of inconsistent styles across our platforms on account of using something like design systems. And I'd also like to add in a word about accessibility. By using our design system, and namely our design tokens, a lot of our colors and a lot of our just the way that we choose to display things have been accessibility tested. And accessibility is a really, really important just goal that our Lightning Design System tries to achieve and work at keeping at 100% with every single component that we build or every single page that we touch, pretty much. And so you can trust that if you use our design tokens or if you use our design system, it's been tested for accessibility and it is 100% accessible. And so now I'll get in a little bit more to our design system components, so namely our CSS framework and our UI library. our UI library was built to empower developers. And so we wanted to provide developers scalable and accessible code at the beginning of the development cycle. We wanted to be able to make sure that the developers were focusing on the harder work, which is, plugging data together and making sure things are actually working versus having to build out specific components. So even taking it down to the easiest UI pattern, like a login form, right? That has been a tried and tested UI pattern that is pretty much foolproof. Most companies have it down pat. And so why should we bother developers with figuring out how to style an input form or something like that when that's something that they shouldn't have to be worrying about? They should be worrying about what happens after you click submit and what happens, where's that data going? And so we wanted to be able to give them something out of the box to use. And in the same regard, we wanted to empower designers. We wanted them to design and iterate more efficiently in the browser, but also just design and iterate more efficiently on design issues that actually matter. So if I go back to the login form example, the login form is tried and tested and true. And so why would we bother a designer with going through trying to figure out a new and novel design pattern for a login form when that's something that they shouldn't have to worry about? So we handle that work up front so designers can focus on actual UI and UX issues that their expertise is needed in. And so to give you an example of how our component system works, so in the middle there's a button, which is the most basic component that exists, I guess. And this is how we use it in several bigger components. So the button is used in a modal, our doc composer component, and our discussion feed publisher component. And the cool thing is that, a button might just be one line of code, but we have established CSS classes that if you just copy that one line of code and place it in anywhere, it'll look exactly the same every single time. So there's value in using our component for this wherever you need to use it. And this is an example of kind of how our larger components are put together to build, our smaller components are put together to build out larger components. And so as you can see, if you click on things on here, like a form element or a button element or a pill, it's going to light up on the left side. And it's just to show you that this larger form component is built up of these smaller pieces, and they all plug and play together. And it even goes down to things like margins and text utilities and stuff like that. So a lot of our components are just, drag and droppable. You can copy and paste them wherever you want to, and it should work, or your UI should look pretty much the same overall. So this is a component overview table, which you can find on our Lightning Design System page. It goes through all of the different components we have, whether they're responsive, whether they're in prototype phases. You can just learn a lot more about the components themselves. And this is an example of what you would find on a component page. So this is the component page for our global navigation component. And you could see that there's different variants and states on the right side. So you could get the default state or you could get the active state. And then there's a ton of documentation about how you can actually use the component and which classes you can use or what markup you can use, how it's accessible. And so this is just another example of what our component overview documentation looks like. So as you can see, it's pretty thorough and gives you a good idea of what you could find, as a breakdown per component that's listed. And so if you head to our website, you'll also find a bunch of our icons, which we have a ton of icons, and there's a bunch of different categories that you could go through. There's icons that cover pretty much every single use case that you would ever really need, and they look great. And so head over to, if you want to check out our design tokens, you could head over to Theo, which is on our GitHub, or you could go to lightningdesignsystem.com to check out our full Lightning design system. And also check out and follow GitHub, Salesforce UX on GitHub, so you can see what we're up to and what sorts of things that we're building. And thank you all for coming.